A massive food crisis is on the horizon, and those who aren't prepared will suffer the most. This solution allows you to grow 100 pounds of food in just 4 square feet, even without sunlight. The information contained inside this video could save your life. For millions of Americans, it could be the reality they face in the upcoming months. A global, system-wide failure unlike any we've seen before in human history. Long bread lines snaked around the block where mothers have to wait for hours for whatever meager rations are left over. Many getting turned away at the door. Local storefronts burned, windows broken, and gangs of looters rummaging through the wreckage. Pickup trucks filled with armed thugs prowling the streets looking for any victim they can rob, beat, or worse, with no police in sight. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to warn you about what's to come. Something one UN leader recently called the greatest crisis any of us have ever seen. Because it is coming. And now we only have precious time to prepare ourselves and those we love from what's coming. Hi, my name is Henry Cobb. I'm a history professor, husband and father of 2 little girls. And what I'm going to reveal in this video is the most important message I've ever given in my entire life. It could save the lives of tens of thousands of Americans like you who see the writing on the wall, but who, despite stocking up guns, ammo, canned foods, and bottled water, are still sitting ducks in the face of what's to come. But I'm not just here to be the bearer of bad news, because if you're one of the lucky few who somehow stumbled into this video, then I'm also going to show you the simplest, fastest, and most effective strategy to secure your family's future starting today. Something that ensures that you and your family never go hungry and allows you to live self-sufficiently, even off the grid. Something that will make you rich in the only currency that matters when shit hits the fan, so you can buy all of the clothes, ammo, and medicine your loved ones will ever need. And something that will fill you with confidence of knowing how to handle every situation that comes your way, from ducking thieves and corrupt government officials to defending your homestead. In other words, I'm going to show you how to build a total fortress of protection around you and those you love most. One that virtually guarantees you rise to the top of the fallen society. It's not going to take much time, barely any at all. It's not going to cost you a fortune, just a few spare dollars. And it works no matter how old you are, if you don't have any help, or if you're a survivalist klutz like me. I know that may sound hard to believe right now, but it's what countless Americans who've watched this video have already experienced for themselves. So I urge you to stay and watch this video until the very end, because I'm going to prove every word of what I'm saying. I'm also going to tell you about the 3 collapse triggers that historians use to predict mass starvation months before it hits, as well as why toilet paper shortages during the pandemic were actually a deadly warning sign that America will soon run out of food, along with how the now hiring signs you see popping up all around the nation could point to a fatal flaw in our global supply chain. I probably don't have to tell you that the powers that be don't want me sharing this message. It doesn't fit into their approved narrative, which means it's very likely this video will disappear from the internet forever. If I didn't think this message was the most important thing I could ever do, perhaps even my life's calling, then I would never put my family and I at such risk. So please, turn off any distractions, take notes if you have to, and pay close attention to what I'm about to tell you. You're just seconds away from discovering everything you need to lead your family to total freedom and safety in the next few months. Like I said before, my name's Henry Cobb. I'm 43 years old and I live in southern Colorado with my wife and 2 daughters. And I'm a professor of history at a small junior college in town. My whole life I've spent in the study of history, fascinated with the big arcs of civilization, the empires that have risen and the empires that have fallen, which is why I've become more and more worried as I've watched the state of the world over the past few years. Like you, I've begun to notice just how strange everything has become. And I'm not just talking about the pandemic either. I don't know if you felt the same way, but deep inside, it just feels like something is off. Like the whole world is hanging on a thread, and at any moment, it could collapse in front of our eyes. I don't consider myself a conspiracy theorist. I never have. But in the past few years, things have changed. Like the whole world is hanging on a thread. and at any moment, it could collapse in front of our eyes. Now it seems like the whole world has gone crazier than ever, and common sense is anything but common. So I wasn't looking for signs of some apocalyptic doom. I was simply paying attention, probably like you, to the signs that were popping up all around me. It all started when I went to visit my local bakery. But when I went to go inside, I found the doors were locked. On the door was a sign, closed early due to staff shortages. And below that another, now hiring. Well, that's odd, I thought. In all my years living here, I'd never seen anything like that. Then it happened again at the grocery store. After paying for my groceries, I was surprised to see my total came out to about $15 more than what I expected. I mean, I've shopped at this store a million times, and give or take a few dollars, I can usually guess how much things were going to cost. I checked my receipt to see what I was missing. "It's the meat prices," a voice said behind me. It was the manager. "Nothing we can do about it," he said. Again, that's odd. Later that week, I received a letter from my daughter's school. Inside, it told me how her school was experiencing food and drink shortages because of supply chain issues and labor shortages. This finally got my attention. You know how sometimes you feel just like something's off? Well, that's how this felt. I did a quick search online and discovered that these cafeteria food shortages were happening all over the country, in Alabama, Kansas, Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, and more. So I kept digging a little deeper. That's when I discovered a surprising trend. Labor shortages, food shortages, supply chain breaks. The more I found, the more agitated I became. And soon that agitation turned to outright worry. See, there's something I probably should have told you. I'm a historian, yes, but specifically, I'm in a field called economic history, which is about as boring as it sounds. But it means that I'm trained at studying big trends like the collapse of economies, social unrest, and, in this case, famine. For my master's thesis, I even wrote about a theory known as collapse triggers, 3 specific triggers that, whenever they appear together, inevitably lead to a collapse of a nation's food supply. And one thing you'll see throughout history is that when the food goes, everything else goes with it. So what are these collapse triggers? Like I said, there's 3: natural disaster, skyrocketing food prices, and supply chain meltdown. Whenever they appear together, mass starvation always follows. It happened in the Soviet Union in the 1930s, China in the 1950s, and Korea in the 1990s. The reason why is actually very simple. First, natural disasters cripple food supplies. Then prices skyrocket, which leads to protests and chaos. Then supply chains shut down as countries isolate themselves. The inevitable result? Disaster every single time. So why did I feel a pit in my stomach growing bigger and bigger? Because I saw each and every one of these collapse triggers lining up before our eyes, and almost nobody seemed to be paying attention. In the words of one food industry CEO, we're sleepwalking towards disaster. Let me show you why. Collapse trigger number 1, catastrophic natural disaster. See this picture? It looks like an image of the Gobi Desert, but it's not. That's what used to be the riverbed of a major river in South America. Normally, it looks like the Mississippi River, and large barges use it to carry tons of grain across the continent. Now they can't, which means it costs $315 million more to transport that same amount of grain. Guess who foots that bill? People like you and I. Then there's Brazil. Right now, the country is undergoing a drought of biblical proportions, worse than it's ever been in the past 91 years, which might not seem like this would affect you and I in the States. But consider that Brazil is the largest producer of soybeans in the entire world. And who eats soybeans? Cows, pigs, chickens. That's right, 98% of the soybeans produced in the world, most of it grown in Brazil, goes to feeding the livestock that make up our meat industry, which is just one reason why meat prices have soared, and why one prominent CEO said, quote, "It's game over for the meat industry." But it's not just meat. Here in the US, we're in the midst of one of the worst droughts in history. Wave after wave of extreme heat has smashed records, crippling our tomato industry and threatening over 25% of our nation's crops. Meanwhile, this heat has allowed grasshoppers to sweep through the country like an Old Testament plague, destroying millions of acres of crops along the way. A recent 2020 study from Columbia University said that the U.S. is facing an imminent, near total depletion of the U.S. food reserves, where over 94% of our wheat reserves could become totally exhausted. Then there's the flooding in China's key pork-producing region, and the rains that wiped out 2.4 million acres of critical farmland. Then there's the devastating rains in the EU causing fungal diseases in grains, and the drying up of the Russian breadbasket, shrinking its wheat crop far below normal amounts. Meanwhile, countries from Ireland to Japan to Turkey to Moscow to Kuwait are all experiencing record-breaking heat waves, putting even more stress on our global food supplies. And look, I know it's easy to hear these statistics and think, well, yeah, this kind of stuff has been going on forever. What's a big deal? That's normally what I would think too. But after listening to the way that those with boots on the ground describe the situation, critical, urgent, game over, unprecedented, highly unusual, unseen in the last 1,000 years, it's clear that what's going on right now is not typical. And my fear is that this might trigger the worst mass starvation event ever in human history. First collapse trigger activated. Collapse trigger number 2, skyrocketing food prices. The cost of meat, poultry, and eggs have soared in recent months. Restaurant chains from Chipotle to Red Robin to Cracker Barrel have all been forced to raise prices to keep up with cost. And the CEO of Unilever, one of the biggest food companies in the entire world, described the situation as unprecedented. Everywhere you look, food prices are going up, and the trend is not slowing down. And even though prices are at a 13-year high, executives from General Mills to the Campbell Soup Company have all warned that they'll be forced to raise prices even more if supply chain issues continue. Then overseas transportation costs have surged by about 250%. And the Federal Reserve, who has been printing money like there's no tomorrow, all of which forced prices upwards. Meanwhile, China has gone on an unpredictably huge shopping spree, buying massive amounts of world's food supply. And our supply chain is creaking under the stress more each day. Can you imagine what will happen when food prices become so expensive that most people can't afford groceries? Well, you don't have to imagine. Just look at Iran, which is not a poor country, but where violent nationwide protests have been spreading like wildfire since the beginning of 2021. Or look at the food riots that swept across more than 31 countries in 2008 to 2011, killing hundreds of people and injuring countless more. If you thought that the BLM protests of last spring were bad, or the Antifa riots in downtown Portland were awful, or the lockdown protests in Australia were scary, just wait until gangs of marauding thieves are roaming the streets, wide-eyed with hunger, furious because the stores are empty, or they can't afford eggs for their families. Imagine the desperation inside everyday Americans as they realize, one after the other, that our food banks are now empty. Nobody's going to save them. And the fabric of society they thought would hold them up forever is nothing but a frayed, dirty rag. That's the world we're heading to. And that's the second collapse trigger activated. Collapse trigger number 3. Supply chain meltdown. Whenever someone starts talking about supply chains, it's easy for your eyes to just roll over. It sounds boring, but I hope you're beginning to see now just why it's so important. See, it's one thing to have natural disasters wipe out the majority of the world's food supplies, and it's another thing to have food prices skyrocket so high that most people can't even feed their families. But those two alone aren't enough to lead to total social breakdown. As long as nations keep cooperating and picking up the slack, the world can normally navigate out of the situation just fine. That's exactly what happened in 2008. First, droughts, just like we're seeing today, crippled the world's food supplies. Then prices skyrocketed, causing massive unrest and protest in more than 31 countries. For a while, the whole world teetered on the balance of like some giant wobbly game of Jenga. But then, right in the nick of time, countries began organizing to make up for all the losses. Japan released its rice reserves to the market, bringing the price down. Organizations like OREC were founded to help stall rising food prices. And the G8, composed of countries like the US, UK, Canada, and Germany, all worked together to put an end to the crisis. Between that and the sudden relief from drought and heat waves, the world scraped by through its first major hunger scare. But now, the last glimmer of hope is growing dim, because in order for nations to work together and navigate out of a crisis, you need 2 things. 1, cooperation, and 2, intact supply chains. Right now, we have neither. The U.S. is currently embroiled in a trade war with China, which, if you remember, has been on a buying binge, purchasing more than 25% of the world's crops. One by one, the nations of the world are closing themselves off to preserve what precious few resources they have left. But even if countries were cooperating with each other, it's become almost impossible to move food around the world. I mean, all of us have seen just how fragile our supply chains are. We saw how a single ship turned sideways in the Suez Canal cost us more than $6 billion and resulted in 30% decline in freight travel for weeks. Or how lumber prices soared by 288% because there weren't enough drivers to move timber across the country. Or how a microchip shortage in Taiwan pushed car prices up and emptied out car dealerships across the country. The supply network is failing. The great big web that's kept the systems of our world intact for the past few decades is slowly beginning to unravel. At some point in time, nobody knows when or how, there will only be one single thread left holding us back from mass chaos. When that thread goes, everything we know and love will go along with it. I call it the Great Unraveling. All it takes is one event, and it doesn't take much. Once it happens, the world will wake up to see that the emperor truly has no clothes. And when that happens, we could see starvation at unprecedented rates, chaos in the streets like never before, and a level of government dependence unlike anything we have seen before. Collapse trigger number 3, activated. If all this wasn't enough to make it clear how disastrous the direction we're headed in truly is, consider what else I found. In June of 2021, a group of hackers stole more than 11 million from JBS, the largest beef supplier in the entire world, marking the first in a string of attacks costing Americans billions of dollars. Meanwhile, Bill Gates has been quietly buying up more than 269,000 acres of farmland, making him the biggest private landowner in the country. Whatever you think of Gates, there has never been a single individual with this much control of our nation's food. One judge described his actions as Napoleonic, and I agree, because whenever someone seizes so much control of our food, they decide who eats and who doesn't. Meanwhile, a recent UN report flat out said that millions are in danger of starvation. Then there are the countless quotes from the CEOs of major food suppliers and organizations like the UN. I think we're heading towards a brick wall in a car with no brakes. Nick Allen, CEO of the British Meat Producers Association, BMPA. We risk a looming food crisis. U.S. Food and Agricultural Organization. We are weeks away from gaps on the shelves. Richard Burnett, CEO of the Road Haulage Association. The driver shortage in the food supply chain is at crisis point. James Bilby, CEO of the Federation of Wholesale Distributors. Humanity is facing the greatest crisis any of us have ever seen. David Beasley, head of the UN World Food Program. As I sat back from my computer, I felt a heavy sense of darkness, almost like a black cloud gathering around me. But inside, I knew that it wasn't time to give up. The fact that I had seen the writing on the wall meant I still had time to prepare. And it meant I still had time to warn as many people as I could. I thought I knew exactly where to start, too. It was a long shot, but I might just be able to warn a few people. So I printed out all my evidence and put it into a folder. I knew my case needed to be as airtight as possible for what was about to come. And as I held the thick folder in my hand, I thought, surely this has to be enough to convince people of what was coming. It was the night of our parent-teacher organization meeting for my son Jake's school. They had called an emergency session to discuss the recent food shortages. As I stepped into the cafeteria, I could hear the friendly chatter of the other parents, but I felt sick to my stomach. Was I really going to do this? I sat there listening as each parent spoke, talking about ways to fill in the gaps. But the whole time, I couldn't help but think, they have no idea what's coming, do they? My heart pounded in my chest. I felt a lump in my throat. I knew it was going to be my turn next. My hands gripped my folder until my knuckles turned white. Then I heard the voice, "Henry? You had something you wanted to say?" And I stood up and I looked at the crowd of faces turned towards me. My name's Henry, and I stumbled getting the words out. "Speak up!" Someone yelled from the back. This was my moment to turn back, I thought. Nobody would know the difference. Besides, who did I think I was? But that's when I remembered a quote that my old history professor used to have scrawled on the blackboard back in college. He made us repeat it every day. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. It was all I needed. So I began. We are weeks away from a crisis far bigger than any of us could ever imagine. As I began to outline my case, I felt more emboldened. I talked faster. I pleaded with everyone to take what I was saying seriously, to prepare their families, to not close their eyes to what was going on. I must have talked for about 10 minutes. When I finished, I didn't know what I'd expected. Maybe some giant applause like in the movies. Instead, all I saw were blank stares. Finally, someone yelled out, "Yeah, thanks a lot, Chicken Little." The crowd burst into laughter. The PTO president walked over, kindly put his hand on my shoulder, and gave me a pitiful smile. "That's enough, Mr. Cobb. Please have a seat." That night, I came home feeling defeated. I thought that people would care, that they'd at least listen, but it fell on deaf ears. I knew then that the only thing left was to prepare myself and my family. So I started making plans. When the great unraveling finally did happen, nobody had any clue how long it would last. It could be weeks, months, even years. It was impossible to tell, but I knew that I'd have to prepare myself for as long as possible. But that's when I ran into an even bigger brick wall. See, I already had a small little pantry stocked up with cans, but when I started looking at how much it would cost for survival food to last for several years, my heart sank. Just to prepare my small family for a few months could cost around $1,900. But to feed them for 5 or even 10 years could cost as much as $37,000. That just wasn't something we could afford on my salary. Meanwhile, you have to keep rotating these foods in and out to keep them from expiring. The more I looked into my options, the more confused I became. There was just too much information. And when you have a limited budget, limited time, and limited expertise, it all just felt like a little too much. I needed a break. Maybe I'm making too big a deal out of all this, I thought. That's when I heard a ping from my email. It was a new email from an address I'd never seen before. And the subject line read, "It's worse than you know." That's strange, I thought. So I opened it and began reading. "Call me R," it began. "You don't know me, but I know you. I saw you speak the other night at the PTO, and I admire your bravery. Common sense and courage are rare commodities nowadays. I think you're 100% right about what's coming, but there's another piece to this puzzle I think you should know about. It might be shocking to you, and you might not want to believe it, but I believe it's important for you to know about. From one patriot to another, R. P.S. Email me here if I can help." Below this were a few hundred words outlining what he meant. As I read through what he sent, I felt my heart rise up into my throat. So be warned. Like R said, the information is shocking, and I don't know how you'll respond to it or if you'll think it's true. Truthfully, I'm still not sure myself, but I do believe that every American deserves to know what was in that email, so I'm going to share it with you. All I ask is that you keep an open mind, because whether or not you believe R's interpretation of what's to follow, I believe it points the way to an even more specific picture of what's to come. And it makes clear the best way to protect your family. Are you ready? Here's what R sent me. First, he told me about a 2010 document published by the Rockefeller Foundation with the innocent-seeming title, "Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development." It's since been scrubbed from many parts of the internet. If you can find a copy of it, you'll see that inside is a 54-page document where a group of global elites outlined scenarios for what might happen over the next 20 years. The scenarios begin to look suspicious. Again, I'm not saying any of this is some kind of a conspiracy, but the coincidences are at least enough to make you think. You see, the 2010 Rockefeller paper begins by describing how even locally, normally bustling shops and office buildings sat empty for months, devoid of both employees and customers. It continues, noting how leaders around the world flexed their authority and imposed airtight rules and restrictions, from the mandatory wearing of face masks to body temperature checks at the entries to communal spaces like train stations and supermarkets, even leading some countries to develop a form of biometric IDs for all citizens. Now, as strange as this all seems, it could just be a well-meaning scenarios of what could happen in a public health crisis. But that's when things get weird. On page 34 of the document, it notes how a once-in-a-millennium natural disaster, one blamed on climate change, would hit parts of China and put enormous pressure on the already overstressed global economy. It explains how massive humanitarian relief efforts would simply run out of resources. And then it describes the oddest scenarios yet, noting how the U.S. would pull out of Afghanistan, where, quote, the resurgent Taliban seize power once again. When I read this, the hair on my neck stood up. How could a 2010 document align so closely to events we see today? One after the other. Empty shops, mandatory mask wearing, Taliban control of Afghanistan. What were the odds of that? I didn't know, but as I read the next few lines, the coincidences became even more unbelievable. What followed were three specific scenarios. First, there would be global food and resource shortages caused by severe economic and climate stresses. Then, soaring food prices would bring low-level conflict in resource-rich parts of the developing world, order rapidly disintegrating, and safety nets evaporating. The outcome? Violence and crime grew more rampant. And finally, nations raised trade barriers in order to protect their domestic sectors against imports and reduce exports of agricultural produce and other commodities. The global coordination and interconnectedness was tenuous at best. In other words, the supply chain collapses. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Here was a document from 2010 which seemed to have predicted every major news cycle of the last few years, including the one we're currently living in. I kept reading. Those who couldn't buy their way out of chaos, which was most people, retreated to whatever safety they could find. And after all was said and done, the document concludes, by 2030, the distinction between developed and developing nations no longer seemed particularly descriptive or relevant. In other words, America and every other first world country could sink into third world destitution. Now, my head was spinning. I had no idea how something like this could be simulated, but I also didn't know how it could be a coincidence either, with so much detail. Plus, why would anybody want all of this? R had left me a message at the bottom. Regardless of whether you believe there's some conspiracy at work, or whether you think it's God's judgment on humanity, or just the foolishness of world leaders, the outcome is the same. He continued, personally, I believe it's part of an agenda to seize control. A food shortage that leads the way to the new Great Reset, where meat becomes a luxury, where Gates-backed impossible meat becomes the new normal, and where, in their own words, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Ever wonder why the media seems so eager to push insect meat on us? I believe that this is the reason, a level of control bordering on slavery. But regardless of what you think, the truth is that the great unraveling, as we call it, is likely only months away, and the window of opportunity we have to prepare ourselves is shrinking. I hope the world takes notice. As I finished reading, I wasn't sure what to think, so I stepped outside to clear my head, watching the clouds from overhead. I felt the same sense of heaviness again. Walking past all my neighbors' houses, I wondered how long they would survive if this crisis were to hit. 2 weeks? 3 weeks? It started to sprinkle. I tried to warn them before, but this time the need felt even more urgent. Not to get dramatic, but it almost felt like the last days of Noah, right before the skies ripped open and flooded the whole world. But despite how bad everything appeared, and as strange as it may sound, as I continued walking, I began to feel hope. The rain fell heavier. I hadn't been in church in a long time, but I could remember the voice of my grandmother telling me how God always left a remnant of his people, how light always shines the brightest in darkness, how good beats evil. So as nightmarish as everything seemed bad, I knew there was still hope. I knew there was still time to save others. It started pouring, so I ran back home, this time filled with even more determination. When I got back, I wrote R a response. I told him that I needed his help, not only a way to prepare my own family, but also a way to help others before it was too late. A few hours later, he sent me a reply. He told me to meet him tomorrow in the parking lot of our local grocery store. He told me to come alone and to leave my cell phone in the car. So the next day, I showed up, followed his instructions, and waited. Almost a half hour went by before I started getting ready to leave. That's when a white pickup pulled up beside me, and I heard a gruff voice telling me to get in. It was R. He had me tie a bandana around my eyes to protect the location of his ranch. And we drove for what must have been about 25 minutes. When we finally arrived at his ranch, I could tell that we were in the middle of nowhere. R introduced himself as Ray, and he told me his story of how he'd grown up in rural West Virginia, trapping and fishing and hunting. He told me how he used to be an Eagle Scout and about his experience serving in the military as special forces. survival was encoded into his DNA. But as he began watching the direction of the world, he realized how many people would be caught if things went from bad to worse. He knew he wanted to do his part to protect as many innocent lives as possible. But Ray was gruff, with a grizzled white beard, leathery skin, and the piercing eyes of someone who's seen things that other people could only imagine. Now, I'm no good at talking, he told me, but when I saw you in that meeting, I knew that you could be my voice. When I asked Ray what message he wanted me to share, he explained that most people go about prepping in all the wrong way. Yes, stored food is essential, but it doesn't do much good if you have to get up and evacuate, he said, and it will only last you a short while. What people really need, he explained, is never-ending supply of fresh, vitamin-rich food. Their personal Garden of Eden they can carry with them wherever they go. When I asked him what he had in mind, he began showing me around his ranch, and he introduced me to something he called an aquaponics system. This is step one, he said. Now, if you've never heard of aquaponics before, here's the lowdown on it. See, aquaponics is the exact pocket-sized Garden of Eden that people need, where fish and plants sustain each other in an almost perfect balance. It has two parts, one filled with live fish and the other a vegetable garden. The plants purify the water for the fish, while the fish do all the hard work for you, fertilizing the plants with their waste. That way you get tasty fish and juicy vegetables, almost without lifting a finger. It's better than simply hydroponics because you don't have to buy tons of plant food to keep your plants alive. Meanwhile, the fish farming is too impractical and dirty on its own. But once you bring the two together in a happy marriage, you get the best from hydroponics and fish farming with none of the drawbacks. It's a win-win scenario for the plants, for the fish, but mostly for you because there's no watering required, no fertilizing, no bending, and actually no real work. The only problem? Most do-it-yourself aquaponics systems are too confusing, complex, and downright worthless, while others you can buy cost upwards of $6,000 or more. But Ray explained that he'd spent years perfecting an unbelievably simple way that anyone can build their own aquaponics for 98% less than it normally costs. Nobody's teaching this stuff the right way, he said. Not on the internet, not in books, and not on YouTube. As far as I can tell, I'm the only one who's perfected this method. But that's just the first part. Ray went on to show me an odd triangular dome structure hidden in his backyard. Apparently, the unique design of this dome allows anyone to grow pounds of juicy tomatoes, bell peppers, and delicious zucchini almost year-round. And all it takes to build is a couple of 2x4s and some plastic sheeting. Its geometric design perfectly reflects sunlight even in cloudy areas. It automatically regulates temperature. And it's so sturdy it won't break in heavy weather. Between these two, you'll have enough food until doomsday, he said. But that's not all. He went on to show me another method to grow 100 pounds of food in just 4 square feet of space, even without sunlight. And he showed me how to fit each piece of his system together perfectly, giving you more food than your family could ever eat, no matter where you live or how much space you have to work with. Guns and ammo are good for protection, he explained, but nothing beats the guy or gal who knows how to make all this stuff. What's inside your head is something nobody can take from you. You can carry it with you everywhere you go. And when shit hits the fan, 99% of the people will have no clue about any of this stuff, making you an irreplaceable asset to anybody. I began to realize what Ray was showing me was the closest thing to total freedom, protecting me from skyrocketing food prices and giving my family and I the peace of mind that we will survive any food crisis. And it's something that could keep you safe no matter what catastrophe comes your way. So over the next 3 days, I took careful notes of every detail of Ray's system. I made him outline it all very simply, so simple that a 10-year-old could follow the instructions. Everything had to be easy enough that an 80-year-old couple or a single mom could put it all together. And we brainstormed ways to keep all of the supplies cheap or even free. After what felt like an eternity, I finally had all the details of his system written down. So I rushed back home and carefully typed them up. When I was finished, I sent a copy to one of my friends, Joseph, who was one of the only people who took my advice at the PTO meeting. Here's what he said about it. At first, I wasn't sure this would be as easy as you made it sound, but damn, it only took me like a few hours to put it all together. Whoever came up with this stuff is a genius. He told me that he even shared it with his mother-in-law who lives in Boston. Here's what she told him. As someone who lives in the city, I've become increasingly worried about what's going on in the world. This makes me feel safe. I know I'll have plenty of food now. Soon, I had people emailing me left and right asking for a copy. I knew then that it was time to put this out into the world. A complete system that makes you feel totally safe and free from worry of major food crisis. I call it the Food Freedom System. It's the simplest, most affordable, and most complete system that you'll find anywhere to prepare you for 5, 10, or even 20 years completely off the grid. It will give instant access to tons of fresh, vitamin-rich food all year round, making you the most key player in the disaster that's to come. The Food Freedom System is incredibly easy to set up once you follow the step-by-step blueprint I've laid out for you. It doesn't require a lot of space, so you can use it whether you live in the cities, the suburbs, or countryside. In fact, just one piece of this system allows you to grow 100 pounds of food in just 4 square feet, even without sunlight. The Food Freedom System will work for anybody, whether you're 80 years old, a single widow, or a lifelong city dweller brand new on your prepper journey. Ray and I wanted something that would cut through all the BS and information overload that leaves so many people feeling overwhelmed, which is exactly why we designed our system to contain everything you need to survive any food crisis. No matter who you are, no matter where you live, and no matter how few dollars you have to invest in preparation. That's just one reason why so many people are raving about it. I put this system together in 2 hours. For each step, it was like you were right there with me, helping me. I didn't think I'd be able to do this, but it was surprisingly easy. I cannot overstate how good it feels to know that my family's food security is taken care of. The Food Freedom System gives me that security, and I'm so happy. Hands down, the easiest to understand and follow aquaponics guide I've ever seen. Inside, you'll find easy-to-follow videos which guide you along every step of the process, leaving no detail out, and using the simplest non-technical language possible. Heck, simply watching this material will make you more prepared than 99% of the rest of the world. So if you know how to press a button, then you can take full advantage of the Food Freedom System. Now, let me tell you exactly what you get inside. First, you get the step-by-step insider details for how to set up your own do-it-yourself aquaponics blueprint. This is the same method Ray's perfected over the last 10 years, and it's the easiest way to turn just a few dollars into a self-sustaining ecosystem which feeds your family fresh fish and pounds of produce on autopilot. When he first showed it to me, I knew I'd stumbled into a literal gold mine. This system is that amazing. One, you hardly need any water. This is obviously important because if the public water system goes down or an extended heat wave dries up all your wells, you want as much water as possible to go towards quenching your family's thirst. That's why this system is so great, because it uses only 10% of the water used in conventional gardening, and the water is actually recycled and automatically filtered for you. So the only water you lose is through evaporation. 2, the aquaponics blueprint you get in the Food Freedom System is probably the only way to grow food in colder areas like New England, which means you'll have plenty of food, even in the middle of winter. 3, aquaponics requires about half the space of traditional gardening. It was actually invented by Palestinians who used the system on their rooftops in war-torn areas. So you don't even need a backyard to use it. Heck, you can use this system in your basement if you want. Plus, using less space means it's easier to protect this system from looters or nosy neighbors you don't want knowing your plans. Finally, you don't need any fertilizer. Just feed the fish, and the fish will fertilize the plants. That's the magic of the system. All you have to do is grab some fresh fish and harvest vegetables for about 5 minutes, and you have nutrient-rich food for your family, while everyone else is out burning calories and dumpster diving, scavenging, or trying to hunt for game. You're sitting back and letting your miniature food factory do all the work for you. That's pretty cool, right? Plus, there's no bending required to use aquaponics. Seriously, since you grow your vegetables in raised beds, you don't have to worry about straining your back each day. And setting up the aquaponics system couldn't be easier. Ray refined his method over 10 years, spending his sweat and literal tears to see it finally work. But by following his foolproof shortcut, you won't waste any time. Like I said, We'll show you how to build this system for less than 2% of what it typically costs to buy from retailers. And you won't have to use the typical $4,000 fish tank that most aquaponics systems tell you to use. Instead, I'll show you the $75 alternative, something you can get even for free sometimes. When I built this system, my total cost came out to be $190, which included $40 for a pair of extra hands and $75 on that part that I could have probably gotten for free. Not bad for something that can feed your whole family. In fact, your aquaponics system could actually save you money. See, unlike survival food, you don't have to wait for a crisis in order to enjoy aquaponics. Countless families are using it right now to grow ripe, juicy tomatoes, fresh radishes, broccoli, and even carrots. Heck, you can even grow strawberries in winter if you know the special technique we'll share inside the blueprint. Given just how toxic so many of our crops have become, even organic ones, most families feel safer eating food they grow at home. Plus, they love how good the fresh produce tastes. But that's just one part of what you get inside the Food Freedom System. Because I'm also going to give you the step-by-step blueprint you need to grow your own Geodome Garden of Eden greenhouse. This greenhouse allows you to grow way more fresh fruits and vegetables almost year-round using nothing but some screws, cheap lumber, and plastic sheeting. The secret is in the design. See, this geodome is made up of a web of little triangles, making it the most stable structure you can build, and making it able to withstand even the heaviest wind, snow, and hail. That's just one reason why FEMA uses the design to construct its own disaster-proof structures. But even though this design is often described as a miracle of engineering, it's actually surprisingly easy to put together with the blueprint I'm going to give you. In fact, my kids and I had a blast putting our own together. The Geodome greenhouse allows you to catch every precious sunbeam that hits your yard, which is essential in most parts of the country. Plus, it conserves heat better than normal greenhouses, which is just another reason why it allows you to extend the growing season. And since these domes are completely freestanding, you don't need any permits. You don't need to set any foundation. And you can even move it across short distances, just like with the aquaponics system I mentioned earlier. Every step is laid out for you in simple detail, and in language so easy a 12-year-old could follow it. And look, I get it. One frequent comment that Ray and I get goes something like this: Henry, I like what you're doing, but all this just sounds too good to be true. Am I really able to build all this, even if I'm 70, and even if I'm not very handy with tools? The short answer is yes. Everything you get inside the Food Freedom System is simple, quick, and easy to use. Sure, there's some cutting to do, and you might want to have someone help you fill the growing beds, but the truth is that you don't have to build anything yourself if you don't want to. I've heard plenty of stories from people who paid $40 to someone for a helping hand, but most people find that they actually enjoy the time spent outside, showing their kids new skills, feeding and catching fish, and harvesting their own fresh fruits and vegetables. Plus, like I said earlier, simply having the Food Freedom System and going through it once will put you ahead of 99% of people who have zero clue about any of this stuff. Finally, you're going to get Ray's 33 Essentials to Survival. In this short guide, Ray boils down his decades of survival experience into the absolute essentials he believes every man and woman needs to know in order to survive any food crisis. It's all laid out in plain English. And inside, it'll show how to use your food resources in order to barter with desperate people, what to do when hospitals are closed and you can't get access to medicine, and what the best currency is when the dollar is worth nothing. Remember that the most important investment you can make in a survival situation is into yourself. The knowledge you have inside your brain can't be stolen by thieves. You can carry it with you wherever you go, even if you have to make a sudden evacuation. And it makes you an essential asset everywhere you go, virtually guaranteeing your safety even in the toughest situations. Now, instead of having to dig through endless forums, YouTube videos, and books, you have everything you need to know in one single place, put together by one of the greatest minds in the survival world. Ray will also show you the 33 most essential items you need to hoard in times of crisis. Minutes after a real disaster, stores get looted by desperate mobs, but most people stock up on all the wrong items. Here's what you need to grab in times of crisis. You'll also discover the best places to find vital survival gear in your local area like weapons, ammo, medical supplies, as well as how to maintain a low profile against the government, roving gangs, and other threats in search of what they can take from you. Stuck in a city? Ray will tell you how to get out, as well as the 14 biggest mistakes people make when trying to escape a city or a crowded area. And that's just barely scratching the surface of what you'll get inside the food freedom system. So, if spending tens of thousands of dollars on a long-term food stockpile is not your idea of preparedness, if you want to be food independent and to put healthy, nutritious food on your table even in a disaster situation, and if you've ever wanted a fun, simple way to build a virtually unlimited long-term stockpile almost on autopilot with only 5 minutes a day of easy maintenance, then the food freedom system is the solution for you. Now, I want to show you how you can get it at no risk to you. So how can you get your hands on the food freedom system? Well, in most cases, I think it makes sense to ask what something like this system would be worth to you. But in this case, I don't think it makes any sense. I mean, when we're talking about the survival of your kids, your wife, your elderly parents, and everyone you love, I think it's obvious that we pay virtually anything to guarantee their protection. So if this training can help you plug just one deadly leak in your survival plan, or if it helps you put food on your kid's table when the world outside is on fire, or if it just gives you the peace of mind knowing that you've done everything to keep your family alive in the event you must fight for your survival, I think it's safe to say that what you get inside the food freedom system really is priceless. Nobody wants to be caught unprepared in a disaster scenario, especially when they had every chance to take action. So speaking frankly, there's just no price tag you could put on the food freedom system that would make any sense. But let's talk in practical terms. The information contained inside of the food freedom system will show you how to easily prepare 5, 10, even 20 years worth of food on autopilot. Considering that a 10-year supply of most of the survival food out there can cost as much as $35,000, I think that's a good place to start. Of course, you could just buy an entry-level aquaponics system from a retailer, which would cost you anywhere between $2,000 and $6,000 plus shipping. But even then, you'd still have to put it together yourself. Plus, you wouldn't have the geodome greenhouse or anything else you're getting with our system. Then there's the fact that the average family spends about $4,643 on groceries each year, which means this system could potentially save you thousands before a disaster scenario hits. Finally, think about all the time you'll save going down endless rabbit holes on the internet, feeling more lost and confused with each passing hour. Given all that, I think that at least $2,000 would be more than fair to pay for the food freedom system. And at $1,000, I'd consider the investment a steal. But you're not going to have to pay $1,000 or even $500 for this system. Here's why. Even though, heck, I'd love to be able to stash away a few extra dollars to help prepare for my own family for what I believe is coming, that's not the reason why Ray and I put this whole thing together. We both want to do our part to make sure that every American, no matter who they are, no matter where they're from, and no matter who they voted for, to have the feeling of absolute security in the face of what's to come. We want as many families as possible to not only survive, but thrive. Because I truly believe that just after this wave of darkness passes, we may see a brighter day and a new America rise from the ashes. I want you to be a part of that. That's why I took so much time making this warning video. And it's why I'm spending money out of my own pocket to spread this message to as many people as possible before it's too late. And as you can imagine, it's not cheap. But along the way, I've encountered thousands of generous Americans who are willing to support my message and pay it forward, which is why I'm not asking for $500 or even $200 for the food freedom system. Instead, all I'm asking is that you help me get this message to the next family, all while preparing your own in the process. That's why I originally set the price for this system at just $97. But today, since you took the time to watch this video, you can get instant access to the entire food freedom system for just $37 on this page only. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to keep that price this low. So if you come back and see that the price has doubled, know that there's simply nothing I can do about it. Then all you have to do is click the button below to get started. But it gets even better. See, when you click the button below, you'll be taken to a secure order form protected by 256-bit encryption, which ensures your information is 100% protected from any prying eyes. Ray nearly beat it into my head how important OPSEC, or digital privacy, is when it comes to anything like this. So your order is 100% confidential. Once you enter your payment details, you'll get instant access to the entire food freedom system. But on top of everything else you're getting already, Ray and I have added 3 additional bonuses to your order. Bonus number 1, the 100-pound potato box. Inside, you'll get the newly discovered method for growing up to 100 pounds of potatoes in just 4 square feet. It uses a clever vertical growing that allows it to be used anywhere, even if you live in the city. What's more, this method typically yields anywhere from 200 to 3,000% more potatoes than conventional gardening, and it only costs about $30 to put together. Bonus number 2, Survival Seed Vault. Inside, you'll get the step-by-step process Ray uses to preserve precious seeds, which can be used for growing your own fruits and vegetables as a type of insurance against disasters that might threaten your crop, as well as for bartering for essential goods. You'll discover exactly which seeds to keep and which seeds are next to useless, even though they're often included in most popular seed kits. Plus, you'll discover the best way to preserve these seeds for years at a time. Bonus number 3, long-term food storage. Now, most people make a few big mistakes when it comes to keeping their survival food fresh over long periods of time, which can be a huge waste, especially if you're invested hundreds or thousands of dollars into your stockpile. Ray will walk you through how to avoid the 6 deadly sins of long-term food storage, as well as a simple, easy-to-use rotation method to keep your stockpile from going rotten. So now that you know everything you're getting inside of the food freedom system, including the 3 additional bonuses we're adding to your order, all that's left is for you to click the button below now to get your instant access. Now, since I know what it's like to invest in something over the internet, especially in something as vital as the safety of your family, I want to go out of my way to make you feel comfortable by protecting your order with an unconditional 60-day money-back guarantee. This means that even though you get instant access to our entire system today, you'll have a full 2 months to leisurely make your way through it. Try it for yourself and then decide if it's worth the small investment we're asking for it. I know that if you're like the countless other people who have already seen the food freedom system for themselves, that you'll likely be blown away by just how simple, easy, and valuable the information contained inside truly is. And I know you'll probably be eager to share it with all of your friends. Go for it. Like I said, Ray and I want to get this into as many people's hands as possible before the window of opportunity shuts for good. But if for any reason you're not 100% happy with this system, just send an email to this address here that I've set up for you, support@getfoodfreedom.com. Tell us that it just wasn't right for you, and I will personally make sure you get every dime right back into your account. No questions asked. Best of all, you can keep the entire food freedom system as my gift to you. Now, I probably don't have to tell you that this makes us vulnerable to people who will just pay to get and access the system and then turn around for the refund even if they love it. But frankly, I'm just not worried about them. I know that every honest person who sees what I've prepared inside the food freedom system will agree that it's worth at least 10 times more than the tiny investment I'm asking for. And if it makes just a few more people comfortable enough to say, maybe today, then to me, it's well worth it. So now that you know everything you get with the food freedom system, your DIY aquaponics blueprint, the Geodome Garden of Eden greenhouse, Ray's 33 essential items to survival, as well as the 3 additional bonuses you get free on this page. Bonus number 1, the 100-pound potato box. Bonus number 2, Survival Seed Vault. Bonus number 3, long-term food storage, as well as the fact that your entire investment is protected by an unconditional 60-day money-back guarantee. What's stopping you from making this important investment in your family today? To get started, all you have to do is click the button below now. We're at the point now when this video is about to end. Once it does, this window of opportunity will be gone for good. I know that if you've been following everything that I've been saying, then you know that we don't have much time. Natural disasters, skyrocketing food prices, supply chain failures, and government forces have all conspired to make a great unraveling inevitable. leading millions of Americans to the brink of starvation or even beyond. You've seen how each of the 3 collapse triggers I mentioned earlier line up perfectly to make this scenario all but inevitable. I don't know when it'll happen. I don't know what the final straw that breaks the camel's back will be, but I can tell you this: a massive food crisis is on the horizon, and those who aren't prepared will suffer the most. I pray to God what's about to come isn't as bad as I suspect it will be, but every sign points to disaster. So this is your final opportunity to opt out of the coming crisis, to secure your family's future before it's too late, and to enjoy the feeling of total safety that comes with knowing you made the smartest decision available to you. It's an investment that costs you less than a dinner for 2, and it could save you thousands of dollars, even if disaster never strikes. Plus, remember that you risk nothing by saying maybe today, since you have a full 2 months to make your decision. I don't want anybody to ignore this message, and when the inevitable does happen, find themselves unable to care for their loved ones. That's why I'm offering you my hand and asking you to join myself and countless other Americans who have already done their part to secure their independence and safety, to reject tyrannical powers to force their agendas on us, and to defend our families. Years from now, you're going to look back and congratulate yourself on making a good decision. I just know it. Ultimately, the choice is up to you, but I truly do hope and pray that you heed this message and do your part to protect your family before it's too late. Thanks for watching. Henry Cobb. Frequently asked questions. Hey, are you still there? I know that buying something online often comes with a lot of questions, and you might have some on your mind right now. So I want to take a couple of minutes to answer some of the most common questions people ask me about the food freedom system. That way, if you're still interested in saying yes, you can make your decision with total confidence. Sound good? Okay, so let's get in. If aquaponics or the geodome greenhouse works so well, why aren't more people using it? That's a good question. There's plenty of reasons why more people aren't using these systems. First, it's an issue of price. See, an aquaponics system, for example, can cost as much as $6,000 or more. For most people, that's just too expensive. Second, it's the fear factor. Most people think this stuff is too complex to build, which really couldn't be further from the truth, especially when you have it all put together for you in a proper blueprint. The third reason is that every serious prepper who does use something like this probably isn't going to be bragging about it. I mean, that's rule number 1 of being a prepper, right? How hard is all this to make? Everything inside of the food freedom system is so simple and easy to build, you'll kick yourself for not taking it up earlier. Seriously. The aquaponics system takes about 2 hours to make, doesn't require strength, and the most difficult task you'll do is just a bit of cutting. The same goes for the geodome greenhouse. That's all, so really there's no excuse for not giving it a try. In fact, if you don't want to lift a finger, just pay someone $50 to watch the short video and put together the system for you. It's more fun than Legos, and many of our clients are saying that their children love it. How long will this all take? It'll take you a little over 30 minutes to watch the aquaponics video and about 30 minutes to watch the geodome greenhouse one. And that's it. Building the system takes under 2 hours for each if you're slow. A lot less if someone's helping you. I don't have a lot of space. Will this work for me? Not only will it work for you, but it's probably the best kind of square foot gardening you could hope for. That's because you can make use of any space, not just a backyard, but also a room in your house, a basement, or even a rooftop. We'll cover all of those details inside of the system. I live in a cold state. Will this work for me? Absolutely. Both the aquaponics and the geodome greenhouses work great even in cold climates. In the training, we'll show you how to weatherproof the system and explain in detail how to properly use the system during wintertime. Can I feed an entire family with this? We don't suggest that you rely on any one particular source of food, because if that source is gone, your family is exposed. That being said, aquaponics can definitely feed an entire family and more. Same goes for the greenhouse. So having the two of them together gives you a pretty big safety net. Is this really risk-free? Yes, it's 100% risk-free. If for any reason you want to return the program, you have 2 full months to do so. No questions asked and no hassle. Just send us an email at this address, support@getfoodfreedom.com, and you'll get every dime back from your order. By the way, you'll have that address sent to you via email too, so you'll always be able to find it. How do I get started? It couldn't be more simple. Just click the Add to Cart button below and let the Food Freedom System give you the peace of mind you deserve. Thanks again for watching. I'm Henry Cobb.